Right now, the final numbers are still coming in on what is already being described as one of Europe's deadliest heat waves in decades, in nearly every part of the story, from the record temperatures to the death toll to the pattern that trapped it all in place for 10 straight days, traces back to a single specific atmospheric structure meteorologists call an omega block. France has confirmed 2,025 excess deaths from the heat, the highest toll the country has recorded since the catastrophic summer of 2003, which killed more than 70,000 people across the continent. A preliminary continent-wide estimate puts the death toll from just 7 days of peak heat at over 20,000 people. Temperatures in parts of the continent ran as much as 18 degrees Celsius above their seasonal average, and behind all of it sat a weather pattern shaped, quite literally, like the Greek letter it is named for, a kink in the jet stream that stalled Atlantic weather systems for over a week and let hot, dry Saharan air simply sit over the same stretch of Europe with nowhere to go. This is the fully explained story of the Omega block behind Europe's deadliest heat wave in decades, what actually happened, country by country, and what the human and scientific record now says about it. No hype, no exaggeration, just what actually happened and what the data behind it means. Drop a comment and tell me if you or anyone you know was affected by this heat wave, because I read every one of these. If you want grounded weather coverage instead of panic headlines, subscribe. It is free. And a like helps this reach people who need to understand this before the next one forms. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Thank you. Now let us get into it. To understand why this particular heat wave became as dangerous as it did, you first have to understand the mechanism sitting behind it. Because this was not simply a hot week caused by a passing high-pressure system. The jet stream is a fast-moving river of wind several miles above the surface that normally flows in a wavy but continuous line from west to east, and it is that continuous flow that keeps weather systems moving, pushing heat out of any one region before it can build for too long. During an omega block, the flow becomes distorted into a large, stationary loop, a ridge of high pressure sitting between two areas of low pressure on either side. And when meteorologists trace that shape on a weather map, it looks almost exactly like the Greek letter omega, a rounded arch with 2 feet. The result is that hot, stagnant air becomes locked in place over the same region for days, sometimes weeks, because the low-pressure systems flanking the block actively prevent any new weather from moving in to displace it. In this specific case, a surface low-pressure system parked to the west of the Iberian Peninsula worked in tandem with the block itself, actively pulling hot, dry air directly off North Africa and advecting it north into an already dry Western Europe, over a continent whose soils had already been drying out under weeks of below-average rainfall. The heat wave turned genuinely dangerous almost immediately. The night of the 22nd into the 23rd of June was France's hottest night since 1947, and within 2 days, red alerts, the country's highest heat warning level, were enforced simultaneously across France, Spain, Italy, and the United Kingdom. By the 25th of June, the Omega block was shifting east, and intensifying rather than breaking down, and the country-by-country records that followed read like a list of nearly every major nation in Western and Central Europe. Switzerland recorded its hottest June temperature ever measured in Basel, breaking a mark that had stood for roughly 80 years. Denmark logged a provisional all-time national temperature record just north of Odense in a series of records that stretches back to 1874. The Netherlands National Weather Service, KNMI, issued the maximum reading on its heat force scale for only the 4th time since 1991, as the country recorded its first ever officially designated super heat wave, meaning temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius held for 3 consecutive days running. Germany climbed from 38 degrees Celsius toward roughly 41 degrees, 106 degrees Fahrenheit, by that Friday and Saturday. Italy placed 16 cities, including Rome, Milan, Florence, Turin, and Verona, under its highest level heat alert. Austria braced for the same pattern arriving behind it, and the United Kingdom confirmed its hottest June day ever officially recorded. The human cost of that 10-day event is the part of this story that took the longest to actually come into focus. And it is worth walking through carefully because the early numbers reported in real time turned out to be only a small fraction of the eventual toll. In the first days of the event, the World Health Organization reported more than 1,300 excess deaths recorded across Europe since the 21st of June, and WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus described the situation directly as a health emergency, noting that Europe is the fastest warming continent on Earth, heating at roughly twice the global average rate, and that heat is estimated to have killed approximately 200,000 people across the continent over just the past 4 years. As France's own mortality data firmed up in the weeks that followed, the country's confirmed toll grew far grimmer than the early estimates suggested. On the 3rd of July, French health authorities confirmed 2,025 excess deaths tied to the heat wave, a 30% jump in overall. Mortality nationally, and a 62% jump in the Paris region specifically, roughly double the country's own first estimate. Belgium recorded approximately 1,200 excess deaths, and the Netherlands recorded approximately 480, meaning France, Belgium, and the Netherlands alone accounted for more than 3,700 confirmed excess deaths between them. Behind those aggregate statistics sit individual losses that make the scale of this event easier to actually grasp. At least 74 people drowned in France as residents sought relief from the heat in rivers, lakes, and unsupervised swimming spots never intended for that purpose. 2 toddlers died after being left in a locked car in the town of Carpentras. 3 elderly residents died in the Bordeaux region. The WHO. Officials and public health researchers studying the event were direct in describing the physiological mechanism behind that scale of death, noting that the version of extreme heat much of Western Europe endured for multiple consecutive days in June. Heat that persisted through the night with essentially no overnight recovery keeps the human cardiovascular system under continuous, unrelenting strain, a pattern especially dangerous for elderly people and anyone with existing heart or respiratory conditions. The continent-wide death toll is still being finalized, and it is worth being precise about exactly which numbers are confirmed versus which remain preliminary estimates, because that distinction matters for anyone trying to judge whether coverage of this event is accurate rather than exaggerated. A preprint published on the 3rd of July by Indiana University. Climate scientist Christopher Callahan used statistical modeling to estimate the continent-wide toll from just the 7 days of peak heat between the 22nd and 28th of June at 20,390 deaths, with France accounting for an estimated 5,210 of those, Germany 4,543, Spain 3,163, and Italy 2,709. The World Health Organization has not yet officially confirmed that specific figure, since it is derived from a statistical model rather than direct mortality records, though researchers studying the event have noted it tracks consistently with the pattern seen in previous heat events of comparable scale and duration. Separate reporting, citing research published in New Scientist, has placed the broader estimate for the full June heat wave, rather than just its single worst week, in a range between 17,000 and 25,000 deaths across Europe as a whole. Researchers studying past European heat events have been consistent on one point. Death tolls from major heat waves are almost always revised upward for months afterward, as full excess mortality data is analyzed, meaning the early figures reported during and immediately after an event function as a floor rather than a ceiling on the eventual confirmed toll. Climate scientists studying the specific atmospheric configuration behind this event have also been clear that the omega block itself is not a new phenomenon. Marco Zanchi, a researcher with the CNRS Institute Pierre-Simon Laplace in France, explained that quasi-stationary blocking, anticyclones of this kind, have always formed over the European continent, and that what has actually changed is not the existence of the pattern itself, but the baseline conditions it now forms on top of. Using a technique called analog analysis, comparing this event against historically similar atmospheric configurations, Zanchi's research group found that weather patterns of this specific type are now running as much as 2.5 degrees Celsius warmer than they were just a few decades ago, and that they are also persisting for longer once they form. Separately, Laurie Parsons, a reader in human geography at Royal Holloway, University of London, has estimated that heat waves of this magnitude are now roughly 30 times more likely to occur than they would have been in the pre-climate change era, a figure consistent with global average temperatures currently sitting around 1.25 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. It is also worth being honest that the heat did not simply end once this particular 10-day event finally broke. Atlantic air finally swept the last of the heat out of Central Europe around the 1st of July, closing the books on the core event, but the respite that followed proved thin. Within days, by the 4th and 5th of July, a fresh pulse of heat reaching 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit, along with new wildfires, was already building back over the Iberian Peninsula, underscoring that this specific omega block was not an isolated, self-contained event, but one chapter inside a summer that has continued producing extreme heat across Europe well beyond it. None of this is happening independent of the wider global pattern either. This same summer produced the hottest ocean surface temperatures ever recorded for the month of June, according to the European Union's own Copernicus Marine Service, and a developing El Niño event the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has flagged as likely to become one of the strongest ever measured by the end of this year, both adding additional heat and moisture into the same broader atmospheric system that the omega block was already trapping in place over Europe. So what does all of this actually mean beyond the numbers themselves? It means the specific danger behind an event like this one is not simply a high temperature reading on a single afternoon. It is duration and a lack of overnight relief, sustained for many consecutive days, which is precisely the combination public health researchers consistently link to the sharpest rises in mortality, particularly among elderly people and anyone with existing cardiovascular or respiratory conditions. It means understanding that the mechanism responsible, an omega block trapping hot, dry air in place for over a week, is not a new or exotic weather phenomenon, but researchers say the same familiar mechanism is now acting on a measurably warmer baseline than it did just decades ago, making each recurrence hotter and more prolonged than an identical pattern would have produced in the past. And it means recognizing that the true scale of an event like this only becomes clear well after the heat itself is broken, once mortality data has had time to be properly collected and analyzed, which is exactly why France's own confirmed toll doubled between its first estimate and its final count. The honest, grounded summary is this: an omega block, a stalled Greek letter-shaped kink in the jet stream, trapped hot, dry air pulled directly off North Africa over large parts of Western and Central Europe for roughly 10 days beginning in late June, pushing temperatures as much as 18 degrees Celsius above seasonal norms and setting new all-time or June temperature records in Switzerland, Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany, and the United Kingdom. France's confirmed death toll of 2,025 stands as the country's worst heat-related mortality event since 2003, and a preliminary continent-wide estimate places the toll from just the single worst week of the event above 20,000 people, a figure researchers expect to be revised further as complete data comes in. Climate scientists studying the event are consistent on one central point. The mechanism itself is old, but the baseline, temperatures it now operates on top of, are measurably higher than they were only a few decades ago. And that shift is what turned a familiar weather pattern into one of Europe's deadliest heat events in decades. We are going to keep tracking this as more mortality data is finalized, sourced to the same health agencies, the World Health Organization, and the climate researchers actually studying this event, not recycled headlines. Subscribe so you do not miss the final confirmed numbers once they are released, because based on the pattern of past events, they are very likely to climb higher still. And leave that comment below. Tell me where you were, or where someone you know was, during this heat wave, because behind every one of these numbers is a French family who lost 2 toddlers in a locked car in Carpentras, 74 people in France alone who never made it out of a river. They entered just trying to cool down, and a public health researcher somewhere right now still working through mortality records months later, trying to put a final accurate number on exactly how many people this summer actually took. 5,000 likes on this one. Let us go. See you in the next one.